All right, welcome everybody to the UDR cast. Today we have Alex D. He's from our hometown, Calgary, Alberta here, and we're going to have a little discussion of his recovery and a little bit of Bill and I's experience as usual. Glad you're all here listening today. I'm going to have Bill kick it off with a question for Alex today.
Hey, Alex, good to see you, buddy.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thanks for coming out and trying to help us help others.
Thanks for having me.
That's why we're here, right? So yeah, Alex, I first saw you or recollect meeting you at a meeting at down on Haddon Road. I think it was a young person's meeting, and I remember you sharing there, and I was really scared for you. Just some of the stuff you were saying, you looked desperate, you looked pretty beat up, but I was kind of scared for you at that time. Turns out that you actually had made a good run at recovery, and you're sitting here 2.5 years sober today. So that's really positive, and congratulations on that, and kind of watched you grow along. But I think we'd like to, we were kind of chatting before we got going here, and let's kind of walk through your story from, you had mentioned you started using around 12, but you talked about your family coming from a good home. Can you kind of give us paint a picture of what it was like as you grew up, and then kind of how you kind of slipped in Banana Peel Trail onto your addiction?
Sure, yeah. I grew up in Calgary, like was said, and I had a really good family. I was afforded afforded a lot of opportunities that a lot of other people weren't, and I had a loving, caring home. But a lot of people in addiction, I still always felt quite out of place and quite uncomfortable with myself. And that kind of started as, I remember it from a really young age in school. And, I played a lot of sports, but I always felt like I didn't really belong there. And, I was always trying to find my place, with whatever group of people I was with. And I remember even as a kid, that kind of started with a lot of, I was basically whoever I needed to be wherever I was, and so whatever allowed me to fit in, whatever allowed, or gave me that sense of ease and comfort that I belonged, it's what I did. And so I remember that from a really young age. And as I started, getting into junior high school, I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol, and, like was shared about 12 and 13. And, and it really became a problem fairly quickly. As soon as I tried them for the first time, it started with weed and alcohol, and quickly moved to cocaine. And as soon as I tried those things for the first time, it really gave me that sense of belonging, or that sense of comfort that I always searched from groups of people, or from my friends or family, or any of those things. And so that kind of started the process when I was quite young. And all through school, my grades started to decline, and the people I hung around with started to kind of support the lifestyle that I was heading towards. And, eventually I started working in restaurants, and I started as a cook, and from a young age, that's kind of where I found my place. It's where I found my people, and people used and drank like I used and drank, and it seemed quite normal in that in that arena to use and drink like that. And so, I really felt at home, and I really felt comfortable for the first time in my life. And so my drug use and alcohol use escalated. And it continued to escalate. And until by the time I was, 17 or 18, it was already quite a large problem. I was already breaking the law in order to sustain my habit. I was already getting involved with selling and using drugs daily, selling drugs in order to support my habit. And that kind of continued to the point where I was 18 and I got arrested and sent to jail for a couple of years for some charges. And, at that point, you'd think that that would be enough of a wake-up call early enough in my, in my life to kind of set me straight. And, even the time I spent, in jail, I thought it was too, even at the time, spending time thinking about it. And I even went to a couple meetings while I was in there, and I think I recognized that I had a problem, and that I needed to change many aspects of my life. But as soon as I was released, after my sentence was complete, I immediately went back to doing the same things that I always did, using and selling, and whatever I could do to to again feel comfortable in my skin, and to again, just constantly searching for that sense of ease and comfort to just feel okay. And that's kind of always what I was just trying to do, was just feel okay. So pretty quickly after that, after I was released, things got really, really bad again. And I ended myself in treatment for the first time at just about 22 years old. I think that I knew I was there for the right reasons. I think I wanted to be there. I thought I wanted to be clean and sober. And, I really did grab a hold of the program at first. But I just don't know if I was at a place where I really had the desperation or willingness to do all of the things that was suggested to me. I was too filled with ego. I was too, I was too young. I thought I was there from, I like what people say, I was there because of a few poor choices and chance circumstances. I just made a few bad calls and hung around with a few wrong guys, and that's why I was there. It wasn't about me. It was about, it was about a few bad decisions. And I think that, so as soon as being in treatment, as soon as, what they provided me gave me back the things that I thought I was missing, I was done. I washed my hands of it, and I think I got that first time. I think I got 4 or 5 months clean, and it, soon relapsed. Living in the treatment center, mind you, and I was off again, and every time I went to treatment, there's a few times, but every time I went to treatment, I would learn another drug to use. The first time I went to treatment was for cocaine, and I had to stop, drinking and doing cocaine. And as soon as I got to treatment, I met other people that did other drugs. And, so when one falls and another falls, you learn pretty quickly a whole laundry list of other drugs you want to try. And so every time I went to treatment, I would get another one. So after that, I was out for another 3 or 4 years. And I soon found myself addicted to opiates. And the funny thing is, when you get a little bit of recovery, I'm a manipulator at heart. And when I get a little bit of recovery in me, I learn all the things to say and the words to say and the attitudes to have. And so I'm pretty good at showing everybody that I'm in recovery when I'm not. And so, at the beginning, I could keep people off my back for 3 or 4 years that first time, until again, it got so bad again, back into treatment. And sure enough, I would, that second time, I think I only lasted a couple of months, and I was back on another run. And every time I'd get into treatment, I would get everybody off my back long enough to continue living the way that I wanted to, because I just wasn't willing to do any of the work associated with being sober. I would get back a few things in my life, and then I was done with sobriety. Again, because I think at my heart, I thought I was just there because of a few poor choices, and hanging out with the wrong people. And so, that led me down the road of trying opiates and a whole list of other drugs. And, again, I would get, and every time I would go to treatment, the next run would be a little bit shorter, and so that first time it was 3 or 4 years. I'd go to treatment. The next time it was 1 or 2 years before I burned my life down back to treatment, to eventually moving myself to Vancouver, because it's a lot easier to get opiates in Vancouver. To the point where I'm selling drugs and using drugs on the streets of East Hastings. And, that obviously took me down a really terrible path, and ended myself back in treatment in Vancouver. And this time I was willing to do a little bit more work. And so I lived at this treatment center for about a year. And but I didn't get a year sober because, again, I started using in the treatment center long before I left. And so, you know, I just wasn't willing to do the work. And that led me down a road. You know, I'm 2.5 years clean now, but I've been in recovery, quote unquote, for, you know, 14 years. And so this kind of cycle kept going over and over and over again until I believe that I experienced enough pain associated with my drinking and using to actually change and actually be willing and open-minded to what has been proven to work for others, and to actually take the suggestions that people gave me.
Now, I want to talk about, because this is like common with every alcoholic or addict I've ever met in my life, is it always starts with, I didn't feel like I fit in. And I think this is a part of what's really hard about getting into recovery, is that feeling doesn't really go away at first. I mean, and that's the whole reason why we start using and drinking, and because we just don't feel like we can be ourselves, and then we're trying to be something we're not, and it's crazy. And then all of a sudden you drink or you use and you're just like, I can just let loose, and you know, all that tension and all that bullshit and that tight grip on life it's kind of at ease. And but it always goes too far. So with guys like us, like my story is like so similar to yours. It's crazy. It's like, you know, I just end up being a fucking homeless bum guy chasing crack on the street. Like you know, that's just where it goes when your lifeline is now drugs and alcohol. So whatever you have to do to get that's what's going to happen. And not everybody has to go that route. I mean, I know, you know, people in the program that, you know, had families and houses and cars and all that stuff, but the desperation of the loneliness still happened. It was just a different situation. So it's not like you have to be a homeless guy to end up recovering or anything like that. That's not the case. But that feeling of not fitting in, I mean, it comes with you when you first get into recovery. And you know, we describe it, I think that, you know, that's a very good example of the spiritual malady. Like, I'm so disconnected from everybody and I'm trying to be something. I don't know how to be myself yet, right? And I don't really know what I like to do, who I like to hang out with, what I like to talk about, because I've just been wasting my life. And then I come into recovery and, you know, there is a sense of community. People understand me, and, you know, coming into meetings or treatment centers. But there's this point where you got to go out into the real world and actually practice this recovery, these principles, these spiritual practices on a daily basis, so that you can actually just like learn how to be yourself in society. And I think a lot of people struggle with that if they're not actually working a program. And, you know, so I don't really know what I'm looking for when I get here. I know that I want to feel better. That's about it. I know that I don't want to keep burning my life to the ground. I know that. Do you want to explain, because I know that you, in recovery, you started chasing some dreams and started acting a little bit out of character and doing some crazy shit. And that, you know, this is part of it, you know, like we don't really know how to do life. Just because you sober up doesn't mean you should just be good at life all of a sudden. But, you know, I think it's important for people to understand that, you know, recovery's it's hard. It's hard as fuck. And, you know, part of why it's so hard is because society is telling us that we should be doing things a certain way. But really, we need to learn what works for us in our recovery and, you know, the people we hang around and all that stuff. So maybe just describe kind of what happened to you where, you know, things went kind of sideways in recovery.
Well, I guess that it's interesting. You know, one of the things that at least for me, when I first got into recovery was, you know, I wanted to feel quote unquote normal again, you know, and so like you see, you know, whether it be messages from society as a whole, or you see your friends that didn't get caught up in drugs and alcohol, or you see all these examples of how, you know, people are living. And now that I'm so like clean and sober, I want to live like that. and so you see these things and you want to, replicate them in your own life. And so, quite often, I got clean and sober, and there was a drive to create that or illustrate that life for myself, and mostly to other people. So it was like okay, well, now I'm in recovery now, so now I need a car, I need a girlfriend, I need a good job, and I need to look like I have my shit together. For the first time in my life, I am not high and drunk all the time, so I need to look like I have my shit together. When obviously in early recovery, I didn't have my shit together, and there was no way I could have my shit together. I was just learning to live for the first time. And I think that, like what you were saying about being uncomfortable, I think that, like, for me, it really stems from like a complete lack of identity. I didn't have an identity when I was a kid either. Like I said, if you liked, if you like scuba diving, I like scuba diving. If you know what I mean? If you, if you like this show, then I like that show. And like whatever it took to help me be a part of, that's what I was. And so the end result of that over many, many years is a complete lack of knowing who I was. And like you said, what I like to do. And because I had no idea, I always acted like everybody else. And so as soon as I got in recovery, I needed to have some sense of being normal. And so I had a drive to attain the things that would make me seem like that from the outside. As opposed to doing the work that is required on the inside to then lead to those things in a natural, healthy way. I had more of a drive to obtain those things before my due, before I earned them, I guess would be a good way of saying it. And that included, especially in the realm of women, as soon as I was sober, it was important to get a girlfriend. It didn't really matter if I liked her. It didn't really matter if, if she was the right one, or if she had qualities that I was looking for in a partner, or that she was, emotionally stable for a relationship, or that I was emotionally stable for a relationship. None of those things mattered. It just had to look good, and so I ended myself in a relationship. I think I was like maybe 4 or 5 months sober, and I don't know if anybody knows, but they tell you not to be in a relationship for at least a year for a good reason. And so I think 4 or 5 months sober, I like I said, I'm a chef by trade, and I've always maintained some level of employment throughout my using history, whether it be for a week at a time or a month at a time. But I'm a chef by trade, and I got a pretty good job when I got sober as a chef here in Calgary. And so one of the girls at the restaurant showed me any amount of attention, and I jumped at the opportunity because it made me feel good, And we were having a conversation, me and Bill, earlier today, and in a lot of ways, there's certain things that I can surrender to my higher power, and there's certain things that I can understand, and especially in split second decisions, but women are not one of them, and so the overriding sense of the overriding hit to my ego, and like in a good way, and the feeling of attention from a female, and all of those things really overrided any sense of right or wrong, or really thinking these decisions through. And so I ended myself in a relationship with a person I didn't want to be with, and for quite a long time, about a year and a half, up until only 3 or 4 months ago, and like that was obviously on paper it looked good, but in the end, it was just not it wasn't the right relationship for me, and I quickly soon realized that even though it looked good on paper, it didn't provide me with happiness, and it didn't provide her with happiness, and it only seemingly filled the void for a very short period of time, and then it led to some really poor decision making, and some real pain in recovery.
Wow. So just for the listeners, we've walked through Alex's story, from the time he was about 21. He's 35 now, and he's got 2.5 years. The story that he was just talking about is a recent story in his most recent recovery. And I just wanted to clarify that because I think I might have been lost if I was listening to what we just did. Also, I would like to backtrack into the early part of your story. And what I was wondering as you walk through from, having a great childhood, walking, starting your addiction at about 12 years old, and then progressing it. What kind of effects did you have on your family? What kind of support did they give you? Did they enable you? Did they kick you to the curb? Like, you ended up in East Hastings, right? Mm. Like, for any mother or father to know their child is on East Hastings, like, the hell they must have been put through by what you've done. Can you give us an inclination of some of the damage you may have done to your family and some of your loved ones?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, having really loving and supporting parents, it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing in a lot of ways. That, when I first, when it all kind of came to light, what was going on in my early, teens, I just, even from a young age, I was very manipulative. I was a very good liar. And so, they wouldn't know what was going on until the whole house of cards had fallen, until I was in a cell, waiting to be transferred to remand, you know what I mean? And so, every time that those things happened, at first my parents had full support, and they just wanted to help me get better. And quite often, I remember at the beginning, it was always like this had to be something else. I remember getting a ton of tests from psychologists and psychiatrists because I had to have bipolar, or I had to have some condition that led me to behave the way that I was behaving. And because, addiction just didn't seem likely. I didn't have a trauma that would cause this. I didn't have these markers that you hear about for addiction. And so, I remember when my dad dropped me off at treatment for the first time. Actually, it was March 17th. So just over, I guess it's, 14 years ago now. I remember he's just like, oh, just make this work, is what he said to me when I got out of the car. And, whatever that meant, but he just wanted me to get better. And so he supported, they loved me and supported me through it all. And there was a lot of terrible nights and a lot of sleepless nights that left them incredibly worried and sad and angry, and all of the emotions that our family members go through. But as the time went on, they continued to try to exert as much control as they could and effort as they could towards getting me clean and sober. And for anybody in recovery, we know that doesn't work. And so as time went on, each time we went to treatment, they were a little less willing to support, until, these last couple times in treatment, no support was shown. And, and it was 3 or 4 months into sobriety before they take my phone call. And like that really was, it was the difference for me. It definitely helped push me along when I knew I had to stand on my own 2 feet, but it also helped my parents. One of the things that I talk to my folks about these days is, when they were able to give up their control over the situation and learn that this was a battle that I had to fight, they were much more able to be at peace with the situation. Whereas before they were trying desperately to do whatever they could with no avail, because I wasn't in a position that I was willing to do the work to be sober. And so, as soon as we all as soon as they gave up control, and as soon as I took control of trying to be to do the work associated with being sober, things all started to change. So it was definitely a really tough road. And, I still see, at 2.5 years clean, I still see a lot of the scars of the things that I've done to my folks and my brother and my family and friends today. We still deal with those things today all the time.
Mm. Um, so as you were kind of walking through that story, the East Hastings thing just keeps coming up for me. What was your life like down on East Hastings? How much time did you spend there?
I spent about a year. So I was using in Calgary, and I started going to university here. Like for some measure, I always managed to keep some aspect of my life looking pretty good, you know. And so I started university here, and I was using, you know, I was shooting up in the bathrooms of Mount Royal University here in Calgary. But you know, but I soon found it very difficult to get opiates. And so the decision was made really quickly that, you know what, I'm going to switch universities. I'm going to move to University of British Columbia. You know, there's a better program that I seem to prefer in Vancouver than I did in Calgary. Because at that time I knew, you know, you could literally just walk down to East Hastings. And I remember I had a guy in Calgary that gave me enough drugs to do the drive. So I had a 10 or 12 hour drive with my parents loaded up in a vehicle to drive me to university. And I had enough drugs to get me to Vancouver. As soon as I got to Vancouver, you know, the withdrawal started kicking in. And so I remember we were staying at my aunt and uncle's house in Vancouver, and I literally took their car and said I was just going to explore the neighborhood, is what I said. Yeah, explore the neighborhood. And I took their car and I immediately Googled East Hastings, and I drove my car down to there, parked it, and started walking around asking people for drugs. And sure enough, you know, if you've ever been down there, you know, you'll hear people saying "rock powder down" pretty constantly as you walk by. And so I learned really quickly the lingo, and I met a guy there and immediately started buying drugs off him. And so I continued my classes, you know, because I was registered at the university. And so I think I made it to, I don't know, 4 or 5 classes, 4 or 5 classes, but just long enough for my parents to leave and think I was, you know, their wonderful, sober son, you know, off getting a degree at a fine institution. And so what ended up happening is I had a place near the university, but I would spend most of my time using on East Hastings. And so I you know, that's just where I could find it. That's just where I could get it. And so my time was less spent at my house, and my time was more spent down there. And I learned pretty quickly. And, you know, like I said, I can fit in pretty much anywhere I am. You know, anywhere I am, I can kind of, I learned fairly quickly the things to say and the things to do. And so I eventually made some friends down there and learned that I could supplement my habit by selling. And so, you know, I used to remember, there's a place called Pigeon Park Savings. It's like a bank for homeless people. And I remember I would meet this lady there. She would pull up in a minivan every day at 11 a.m. and we would all be sitting there waiting, and she would give us all of our packs to sell for the day. And when I say I sold drugs down there, I mean like I sold just enough to keep myself high. You know, I wasn't making any money by any means, but I would sell just enough to keep myself busy, and I would get a room at the Pennsylvania Hotel, if anybody knows that, down there, and that's where I would stay until I sold all my drugs and had enough drugs in my pocket to last a couple days back at my house. So, you know, and that continued for a while until I couldn't afford to pay the rent of my house, which was, I don't know, a month or 2 after that. So I remember then I just spent all my time down there, and it was just where it was out of necessity, you know, and I remember being. You know, the safe injection site was a pretty popular place at that time. It was the only one in Canada at that time. It was called Insight. And I remember that was open from 10 a.m. to 4 a.m. every day. And you'd be surprised how, and, you know, I was always terrified of overdosing. So like I tend to use there as much as I could, but you'd be so surprised how, you know, someplace open 10 a.m. till 4 a.m., you know, there's really only 6 hours there where it's not open, and I would still end up using in some pretty questionable places during those 6 hours. But I remember you had to get a nickname when you're there, because you'd sit in, you'd go in and you'd sit in a waiting room, and there was a big metal door, And, you'd wait in there and they'd had 10 or 12 stalls in the safe injection site. And, but you'd have to wait in the waiting room and they'd come out and they'd call your nickname. And for some reason, mine was A Diz. It was the easiest thing I could think of at the time. But I remember the anxiety and sheer panic while you were sitting there going through withdrawals, just waiting for that door to open and them ask you, like them call out your name, and, I just remember like that, like it was yesterday. And so, that continued for a long time, about a year, until eventually my parents caught on and, they literally came to East Hastings and dragged me out of the gutter, and put me into a Harbor Lake detox facility, right down on Cordova. And from there I went to a treatment center out in Port Coquitlam. But it was, the funny thing is I look back now and I think, oh man, what a terrible time in my life. But in the moment I was living it, it was just life. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like it was normal. It was just life. Like I whatever I needed to do, to get high and whatever I needed to do to stay high. And that's what I did. And so, when I've gone back to Vancouver a couple of times, the funny thing is I went back actually in August this year, to visit a few friends that are out there. And I remember getting off the plane and getting outside and as soon as I smelt the city, like every city has a unique smell, but like the combination of the ocean and as soon as I was there and smelt it, my body was completely taken over by sheer panic and anxiety because it just brought all of that back up. And I remember going down. I had to go down there. I wanted to go down there and just see what it was like. And I remember going down there and thinking, man, this is so much worse than it was when I was there. But it wasn't. It was exactly the same. It has never changed. It's exactly the same. But, at the time, I think back at the time, I didn't think it was crazy. It was just what I needed to do to keep high and to stay high. And like I said, addicts have an incredible ability to adapt to whatever situation they're in. And we just think it's normal. And so, looking back, it was obviously a crazy time in my life. And, nobody wants to shoot up with puddle water, but that was just where it took me. But, East Hastings it's not a great place, but when I think back on it, it just seemed normal.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, I guess I'm lucky in that sense because here in Calgary, like all the places that I used to use are like Cecil Hotel that got demolished, the cul-de-sac by the St. Louis Hotel, that's all cleaned up. So I don't really have a lot of stuff that reminds me. So I'm actually really good. But I do still see guys like on the street still doing the same shit, chicken across the street and all that. Every once in a while I'll be like, yeah, man, I hope he doesn't recognize me. But it's been long enough now that, it's like I don't think I have too much to worry about. But okay, so let's talk about like when you actually, I know that you've been in and out of the program, you've been treatment centers and all that stuff, but let's talk about the when you this past 2.5 years, you made some kind of decision within yourself to actually do this program to the best of your ability, or else you wouldn't be sitting here, mm-hmm. right? And because I know I was the exact same way, dude. Like 2009, I came in, I stayed sober for 3 years, then it was 2 years, then it was one 6 month, one, mm-hmm. and it was just, I couldn't seem to get on track. And then this time around, I was just like, I'm not doing it again. I'm not going back. And that's when I phoned Billy, or I didn't phone him, I ran into him after a prayer.
As we all do.
Yeah.
As we all do.
Yeah. So, but there was just something about like this time in my sobriety where it was just like, I can't relapse again. I just can't do it again. So there was a bit of a desperation that drove me into, and I would like my first year, this time around, my first year was not very good. Like it wasn't very good at all. I was more staying sober on pure self-will, let's say, and I knew it wasn't working. I was still doing that hot and cold thing where I'd have a good week and then a really bad week. And then like, I just feel that discontent come in and I'm like, holy fuck, like just hanging on for dear life basically. Right. And I was doing a little bit of prayer, and I was doing some meetings, and I had broken up with I left my wife and kids, and like I was fucking disaster, to be honest. And so yeah, I mean, I can't really explain it other than I knew I couldn't relapse again. I knew that it kept getting worse because my relapses throughout the years after staying sober for 3 years, my relapses were kind of short lived. And I was like, well, I'll just go right back to AA. But the last one, it was real ugly. It was real ugly. Like, man, my my wife left in the morning to go to school, and I was out for days, and I passed out till 2 p.m. with like two baby kids, not eating or being able to use the bathroom. So they were screaming at 2 in the afternoon. So you probably woke up at 7 for that time, and I remember, holy fuck, like this can't happen. When kids were involved, it got real ugly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew that I had to find. And when I prayed hard for like, God, I don't know how to get rid of this feeling of discontent, and it was pure desperation. And a week later, I ran into Bill, and I was just so willing to do fucking anything and do it differently, and actually learn about the program, the 12 steps, and actually really give it all I had. Because I don't know, I think for a long time I just thought, like, this shit's pretty fanatical. You get the big book guys, and they're blah blah blah, big book blah blah blah, and they're spitting out lines in the meetings, and I thought, that shit's totally fucking fanatical, and it's just not for me, right? But I'm the one who keeps relapsing, right? So anyway, I mean, I came in, and I was just willing to fucking do anything, and that was even, at that point I was a year sober, but I was still in like another bottom, a different kind of bottom, emotional bottom, where I was just like, fuck, I cannot relapse again. So what was your deal this time around?
Well, I think that, like, to give an accurate answer to your question, I think it starts because I when I came back from Vancouver, I went to treatment there. I came back from Vancouver. I relapsed, after the year in the treatment center, and started using at about 9 months, and then I came back to Calgary, and I started smoking crack like every day, and so that continued on for 2 or 3 years, and then I ended up in Simon House in 2017. And I went to treatment there, and I was there. I was desperate. I was so tired of being, they always, the cliche saying, so tired of being sick and tired. And I just wanted to change, and I was willing to do anything I needed to. And I did it, and I did those things. And I listened to every suggestion, and I stayed at the treatment center for 6 months, and I got out, and I moved into a place, and I got an amazing job as a chef of a small restaurant with with a husband and wife, friends of mine, and everything was taking off, and then at about let's say about 7 months sober, I let the job start creeping in. I let 5 meetings a week that I was dedicated to turned to 3 meetings a week, turned to 2 meetings a week, turned to 1 meeting a week, turned to no meetings a week. All of a sudden, all of the suggestions that were given to me, and all the things that I did to get up until that point, I slowly stopped doing them. And so, that brought me to, about 8 months sober, and I was kind of holding on, and I was just white knuckling it, and I was pretty much disconnected from any form of recovery at that point. And I remember sitting on my couch, and I blocked all my drug dealers' numbers. And I remember sitting on my couch, and I just unblocked them. Couldn't tell you why. I just unblocked them, and I knew that they'd start calling because they're good salesmen. And, so they started calling, and I didn't answer the first time. And then the second time they called, I remembered I answered and said, "Hey man, no, I'm clean, bro. I don't, I'm clean and sober. So take your business elsewhere." And then the fourth or fifth time I eventually said, "You know what? Yeah. Why don't you come by?" And then I was off another run. It took me 1 month from that point to burn my life completely to the ground, embezzle $7,000 from the business, get arrested for it, lose my house, lose my job, lose everything again. And in that moment, I went back to treatment at another place here in Calgary. And so at that moment, the difference is like, I finally realized that you have to work for sobriety. You actually have to work for it. You know, the treatment centers they automatically give me 6 to 9 months. Like that's really what they do. I just got to go there and they'll give me 6 to 9 months sobriety pretty much for free. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the deal, you know? Alberta Works pays for me to go to treatment and I get 6 to 9 months sobriety because, you know, I'll go to the meetings they tell me to, I'll do my chore, I'll wake up when they tell me, you know, I'll volunteer, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll get a job with their, you know, they'll help me find a job and then blah, 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 blah. And then, you know, that's, as soon as I leave those places, that's when I actually have to start working for my recovery. And I never did that, you know, and like, that was the final realization that I have to continue this all the time. And like, I know that sounds crazy to take 14 years to figure that out, but that's what it took. 14 years of pain and suffering to figure out that this is going to be a continual thing that I have to do every day. And I have to continue to do the same things I did yesterday, tomorrow, you know, and I just wasn't willing to do that. And every time I ended flat on my face. So like this next time was like, okay, I'm going to continue doing this. I'm going to do the things I never did before in recovery, you know, because there was always certain things that, you know, I do 5 or 10 people on my step 8 list. You know, I would, you know, in a 9 and I would do inventories for, I don't know, a month or 2 until my sponsor stopped asking. You know, I would do, you know, this and that and until it was sufficient that people stopped bothering me about it. And so this time around, I stopped doing that. I do my inventories on my own. You know what I mean? I started sponsoring guys. You know, so the difference is I realized that I had to work for it. And when I started working for it, I really, you know, it was all the difference in the world. I don't think I ever even experienced any actual recovery before. You know, like this is the first time that I've actually experienced some actual recovery. And there were bumps and pain and mistakes and all sorts of things along the way. But it was something that I had to continue to work for. And that was the realization that came. And that seems so blatantly obvious, but 14 years it took me to get that.
Wow. When it clicks, right?
Yeah.
It's my buddy Jesse, he'd always say that to me about the guys that he's working with. And when it clicks, right? And I think the benefit of at least coming back, you know, we got the old saying, keep coming back. I think what should go with that, it'll click when it clicks. And not only like what happened to you where it clicked, where you're like, holy shit, I have to actually work for this. But then all through the process of recovery, you get the little clicks where you're like, holy shit, you know, the little mini spiritual experiences along the way that allow us to see life from a different perspective as we keep going down the road. What I really, really like what you just shared is treatment center, you get a free pass for 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 months. And a lot of guys go to treatment and they come out of there and they think they got this, right? But they don't. They don't. And like, it's really hard to stay sober. Like it really is, right? For the real deal alcoholic and addict, there's a lot of moderate drinkers and addicts in treatment and in the program. There's a lot of heavy drinkers in treatment and in the program. Some of these guys can get away with doing some of this half measure shit because they're not utterly powerless over this friggin' illness, right? So with you, obviously your story really describes well that you're fucking powerless, right? And your life was fully unmanageable. And when we talk about unmanageability, yeah, you have the evidence of the outside, you know, things about, you know, your life was unmanageable on the outside. But I think more so the life was unmanageable on the inside. And a dictator of that was when you were sitting on your couch and you thought it was a good idea to unblock all the drug dealers, right?
Yeah.
Like, who fucking does that, right? But that was the beginning of the dishonesty. That was the beginning of the relapse. You know, the alcoholic is incapable of honesty on his own. They're going to rationalize, justify the most errant bullshit to suit whatever it is. And you knew you shouldn't use, but like the book talks about, you know, we succumb to the desire again. We don't have a choice. It's not a matter of choice. Your drugs of choice aren't your drugs of choice. They're your drugs of no choice. If you don't medicate the spiritual malady. one thing we haven't talked about today is we haven't really mentioned the word God. So as you get into recovery and you start hearing this God word, what was I'm going to give you a couple questions here. What was your initial thought on God as you first came in, or whatever you want to share on that? And then as you get into this last 2.5 years of your recovery, you need God. I always like to share that the theory of God will do fuck all for your longevity of recovery. A lot of the beginning recovery is grace of God recovery because you haven't done anything to earn it. And that's what grace of God means, undeserved gift. So some of your recovery, probably in many aspects through your years, have been undeserved gifts. But the theory of God probably played a role in your recovery to the point where, you had to understand that God cannot be a theory in your life, but he has to work in and through your life, or you don't fucking stay recovered. So can you share maybe a little bit on God in your early recovery and how it maybe the theory of God and how God's working in your life today?
Yeah, sure. I think that up until, like I said, these last 2 treatments, I think they're the real important ones. Like I think up until the last 2, I just gave it lip service, like, sure, whatever. Yeah, I'll do and say whatever I need to do in the previous treatments. But this last 2 times, it was like, okay, I'm going to really dive into this and think about like what they're actually talking about here. And, I like what you had to say about the grace of God, because that's the 6 to 9 months that I get in treatment, and like that's just all it is, right? And so I think that this last time, I always, like, I was raised a Catholic, and so I had some vague idea of what maybe God was, and in the previous times I was in treatment, I was like, oh cool, I was raised Catholic, I'll just use this like nonsense that I was taught as a child. And that'll be my higher power because I know what it is and I know all the prayers already, so that'll be easy. Well, that didn't work at all, so shocker that didn't work, so I really started to dig into it this last time. And the thing that I came to, the easiest way for me to understand it was first of all, I just did what I was told. Like the whole idea of the steps is to gain a connection with this higher power over the course of doing the steps. So at the beginning, I just kept an open mind and willing, like, okay, let's do, you believe in God. You show me how you learned how to believe in God, and I'm going to do the same things that you did, and we'll see if I can get there too. And I'm going to keep that idea open, and I'm going to be willing to try. And that started with just the prayers in the book and all of those things. But then I started to really when I worked through the steps, I really started to come to understand what my higher power was, and what, not understand what he was, but understand what I hoped he would be, and like through understanding that, I could kind of understand how he would then want me to live, and that was really hard at first because my brain was so pre-programmed to making decisions based on how I want to live, which is as a East Hastings drug addict. So like I'm pre-programmed to want to live like that, right? So it's like, it was really hard at first to start changing that programming. But the more and more that I did the things that was suggested to me, the more contact I gained with my higher power and with God. And as long as I continued to do those things that were suggested, these simple things every day, the more and more belief I had in my higher power, and the more faith that I had in this life that he would have me live, and the more I did it, the more I believed in it. The more I did it, the more faith I had in it. And now it's blossomed into a strong connection that I still don't always, that I still make mistakes and I still don't always follow it, but I keep turning towards it is the important thing. I keep turning towards it, and I keep searching for the next. I keep handing it over. And I don't always do it perfectly, but I keep trying, I guess, is the main point. But it really as soon as I was able to throw away all preconceived notions of what God was, and was really willing and open-minded to doing the things that were suggested to me in the program, that's when I actually started developing a concept of a higher power and really started believing.
Yeah, it's interesting because we can kind of start to put our life back together and kind of think, well, this is what they're talking about. This is all God. And, that's kind of what happened to me. It's like when things start going well and things start to kind of line up, that must be what they're talking about. Then I start to realize that, the only way that I know how to connect to this higher power is to remove all the shit that's in the way, to remove all the shit that's in the way of love. Basically, it's kind of my conception. In my opinion, God is pure love, higher power, whatever you want to call it. So I have all these things like fear and anger and resentment and all this stuff within me throughout the years. The way I think creates it mostly, right? So this program, I start to get rid of that stuff, and then I start to connect with this thing. Basically connecting to my heart, which I believe is connected to God, right? And and I start to learn to live with basically like making decisions, because I used to just make rational decisions. Like I would just fucking buy shit that I didn't need. I'd be on the fucking car lot buying a new truck when I just had the same truck, and this one had a bigger engine, so I'm just fucking gonna get it anyway. And I'm not talking to anybody about it. I just think it's a good decision. And and then my payments keep growing because I keep getting these new trucks based on financing. It's just fucking ridiculous. But I start to listen to myself. I start to listen. When I say listen to myself, I don't mean my thoughts. That's fucking bad place to be. As an alcoholic, don't listen to my thoughts. It's a terrible place to go. But I start talking with other people and like having these discussions before I make decisions, right? And, I can feel within me what's right and wrong. I can't do it right away. It's not like, is this right or wrong? Right, go. Yeah. It's not like that. It's like, I got to talk to some people, I got to see what feels right. And I start to live my life in a totally different fucking way. And, I'm not making rational decisions. I'm talking to people when I feel fucked up, trying to figure out what the truth is, because my mind wants to create these stories, and it's all nonsense usually. And it's all decisions based on self later put me in a position of hurt. And so a lot of that stuff, it doesn't just go away when we recover. We got to deal with it in some way or form. Sometimes, we got to deal with it in our life today, but sometimes it's like these emotions or these feelings that are just fucking in me, and they haven't gone anywhere because I've never learned how to express any of this shit. So I start to learn to be honest with the way I'm feeling and, the thoughts that I'm having, so that they don't turn into something they don't need to be. Because if I have all these bright ideas in my head and they start making me crazy and I don't discuss it with anybody, step 4 and 5, that was my first crack at this, because I never hung out with guys that you talked about real shit with. It was never that. It was like these grandiose conversations at 5 a.m. while the birds are fucking chirping, and like it's just but today is different, right? Like you come into the program and you start to trust this higher power thing, because as you start to do this program, you start to see how your life is coming, how you start to feel, how you feel these days. And the whole program has directed you to find a God of your understanding. That's the whole fucking point, because without it, I cannot stay sober. But I just start to navigate life differently. I start to stop trying to do it alone, and I just let go of the outcomes. I have no control over the outcomes. I need to get that through my fucking head, that the outcomes are not my fucking job anymore. Because, that's that blind faith. I'm going to do these things. I don't know how it's going to work out. It used to be, I'm going to do this because I want when I want, and I want it soon.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd be a fucking basket case by Friday because it's not here yet, or it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. And then I'm just I'm a mess, right? So this blind faith thing, it's very cool, but I need to have space within me to start to actually have the experiences that show me, yeah, there's something greater than me, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a fucking basket case on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And, I start to live my life with different principles, and I start to, build good character and try and do things differently. The proof is in the pudding. That's the bottom line. Problem is, guys don't really tend to want to work on this stuff to stick around to see the proof. Or, they think that, the spiritual way of life is just supposed to be fucking happy. And, if I don't feel great all the time, this is bullshit. And they get fucking impatient, right? But there's gems in the pain.
Mm-hmm.
There's gems in the pain. We need to go through the pain because we've been fucking up our lives for how long, destroying relationships and all this stuff. Like that stuff isn't just the pain from all that, the guilt and shame from all that. That doesn't just disappear when you go and come in recovery. This is why it's so hard. Sometimes you wake up and you're like, fuck, I feel crazy. Why do I feel this way?
Mm-hmm.
Something's going on. And I better pray and, give this shit to God and talk to somebody about it, because, I can't just let all these little things when I don't feel good, just pretend they're not there anymore,
Mm-hmm.
And I look at my life today and it's like, wow, from Cecil Hotel on the street, sitting here doing a podcast with you guys, everybody has a job, everybody's doing their thing. So it's a blessing, man. And God has to be the center of my decisions today, the center of my life. And it's a very peaceful place to be. And it's a very, there's a confidence in it, like a God confidence, where it's not like an ego confidence, right? It's a very sure feeling of everything's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That it's interesting too. I like what you had to say there. In recovery, I've experienced lots of those moments, and I'll give you an example. Lately, like I was shared, the last time I burned my life to the ground, I embezzled a bunch of money and I ended up getting charged with fraud. And so I got, I soon went to treatment after that. And then after treatment, I was sober now, and I started making all these decisions and living and working hard on my recovery, and things started to happen really good. And then I get a phone call one day saying, that I'm being investigated for this fraud, and that I'm being arrested. And so I get arrested and I get charged, and at the moment, I was okay with it. I accepted that was, part of cleaning up the wreckage of my past. And I really, at that point, I was working really hard in recovery and on this connection with my higher power. And so I really felt this sense of ease and comfort that whatever was going to be, and God would take care of it. And as time went on, the process of dealing with this charge got delayed quite a bit by, the pandemic and this and that. And so, these hearings continued on. And as that time went on, I started to gain a bunch of things back in my life, like cars and jobs and payments and this and that. And I remember, when it finally came down to sentencing, I was going into the courtroom and I thought, this is done and dusted. They're going to look at all this amazing shit I did in my life, and how I've turned my life around, and they're going to give me nothing. I'm going to walk out of here clean, and just be done with this. And I remember I walked into the courtroom and the judge basically said, no, you're going to need to go to jail for a length of time. And I remember walking out being so disappointed. So when I walked into the courtroom, when I first got arrested, I thought, if God's plan for me is to, put me in jail for this crime I committed, I can accept that. If this sentence is going to provide some sense of ease and comfort to the people I hurt, to the victims of my crime, if they're going to feel some measure of justice, then that's what's deserved, and I'm okay with that, because I was very God-centered at the time, but as soon as I got all these things back in my life, that ego started to reassert itself, and I didn't want to go to jail, and I didn't want to have to give up any of these things that I had acquired, and I didn't want to do any of those things. And so as soon as the judge said that, no, you're going to have to go to jail, my first reaction wasn't to be God-centered. It was to stomp my feet like a child, And so then it was about like, don't you know how much I've done in recovery? I sponsor guys, like, you're putting my recovery at risk by putting me in jail. Like, don't you know who I am? And blah, 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 blah. And I was in this position for about a week, I think. For about a week, and after that sentencing hearing where he said I was going to go to jail, I was just angry and filled with with ego, and until somebody made me aware of it, in that moment, that like what happened to the guy that had given it up to God? What happened to the guy that was okay with the justice for the people that you had hurt, and and all of this stuff, and put me away if I had to? I was like, well, that guy didn't have a bunch of new shit, like now I got to keep all this new shit I got, and so as soon as I was made aware of that, I really started to focus my life, back in terms of my spiritual connection with God, and start to realize that this was the plan the whole time. And I think that he provides things, these lessons come and go through life. And, walking in the courtroom that first time, I was like, okay, I got this licked, just like sobriety, I got no problems here. This is going to be great. And he gave me a little bit of a shot, and really put me, knocked me down a few pegs to the point where I could understand what was actually going on here. And so this last time I went in for the final sentencing hearing, and, I went much more, I went in the courtroom much more ego deflated, and I was just willing to take whatever was going to come my way with open arms, whether that be 6 months in jail, 9 months in jail. I didn't care anymore. And I'd given up, like you said before, I'd given up the outcome. The outcome wasn't important. God's going to put me where he's going to put me. As long as I do his, as long as I try to live, the way he wants me to, I'll be okay. And as soon as I did that, judge gave me 6 months house arrest. so the things work in mysterious ways. And it just shows, as soon as I try to exert my control or feel, that I'm going to run the show again, I'm met with pain and discomfort. And as soon as I give that stuff up to God, I'm met with a sense of ease and comfort that I've always been searching for.
A while back, you gave me a call. I'd run into you at a meeting, and you were pretty desperate. Very similar to like what Tommy was talking about earlier. Tommy had some time in, had gotten to a jumping off point, but he knew in his deepest concession that he couldn't use again, but he didn't know what to do, right? And prayer, whatever. Tommy and I kind of did some work together, and he's been on a pretty good path for the last long while now, and it really redirected him. So you, very similar to Tommy, in my opinion, you got to a place where you're sober, but you're not fucking happy. And you know that you cannot use again, and there's got to be something happening like fucking now, right? And so we had a chat at that meeting, and then you got redirected to Tommy. And, the thing that sticks out to me is you came and shared on our speaker meeting one night. And your message wasn't your story about strength and hope. It was basically a warning saying, don't do what I'm fucking doing to all the people that were on the meeting, because it's not going to turn out well. And it's pretty amazing that you were able to grab on to something, some type of something at that moment, and kind of recourse your life. Since that point, I've seen a dramatic increase in your level of consciousness and what you're doing, and it's pretty amazing. Can you tell our listeners, maybe give them that same warning of kind of what was falling away, And then the understanding of you can't just keep doing what you've always done in recovery. You got to grow in this shit too,
Mhm.
right? Can you re-warn our listeners? Because there's a lot of people that fucking don't hang on where you hung on, and they go the other way, either suicide or relapse, and ultimately it's death, right? With us.
Yeah, I guess like I like what you said about what works in early recovery doesn't work in later recovery. And so what worked in early recovery for me, like I said, I think there was a big chunk of it that was just grace of God. And I think that there was some real work that I had done for another 6 or 8 months. And then, like I said, the life, just like previous times, life starts to take off a bit for me again. And so I start to rely on God less and rely on myself more. And it just starts slowly. It starts slowly, and for me, it always starts with stopping doing the maintenance that I do on a daily basis to keep that connection with God. And that looks like these inventories and obviously the bigger things like going to meetings and sponsoring guys and all of those things. So I stopped doing those things. And naturally, when I stop doing those things, I start being less grateful for what God has given me and more entitled to what I gave myself. You know what I mean? Like I start thinking that God didn't really do this, I did. And like as I stop talking to God and as I stop doing his work in my life, I start to think that all the good things that have come have been on my own accord. And as I start thinking that, I start exerting more and more control over my life again. And so that looks like being in relationships that I'm not supposed to be in. That looks like buying things I'm not, like Tommy was saying, buying things that I'm not supposed to, and kind of all of a sudden that hole that was once filled with God is now empty again because I haven't kept that connection with him. And like for people that are early in recovery, that connection is developed by doing all the shitty things that your sponsor tells you to do that you don't want to fucking do. Do you know what I mean? Like that's where that connection starts. So I'm sorry, but you got to do those things. Like, you know what I mean? That's the only way around it, right? There's no other way around it. Like that's how it works. When I behave poorly, if I don't have a record of behaving poorly, and if I don't talk to somebody about how I should not behave that way, then I'm going to continue behaving that way. And so that's how it started for me. Is all of a sudden, the pandemic happened, and then it was a pretty good excuse because there was no meetings to go to, although there was tons online. All of a sudden it was pretty hard to sponsor guys. So like, I'm just not going to sponsor guys anymore. And all of a sudden, the ego reasserted itself in my life. And all of a sudden, I was the reason why where I was. I was the reason why I was where I was. It was all about me, and it was all about the work I had done, and this and that. And so all of a sudden, that hole kept growing and growing, and I kept trying to fill it with more and more things that didn't do shit. And I felt horribly, progressively worse and worse over time. Until there was a point there where, I don't want to say that I thought about using, but I think the only reason I didn't is I continued to surround myself with people in the program, and like I think that I was just lucky enough that God showed up in my life in all of these other people, and that, that kept me sober at a point where I was doing little to no work to be sober, and that's what happened. And then until now, the fortunate part about it is that when that's recognized, and for me, it was recognized by a few other people first before myself, and then I started to come around, and then I started talking to you, Bill, and Tommy, and once that happens, you can get back on it quick. You can develop that connection again really quickly. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't, and they go the other way. And so I was, I think I was just lucky. Like, to be honest with you, I was just lucky, and I think that that God had other plans for me, and and like I really believe that God shows up in my life in all sorts of ways. I developed this connection with Him, but He also puts people in my life that care for me and look out for me, and He continues to do so. So I think that I was lucky, and I think I had the right people in my life, and I think that I don't, I started feeling an overwhelming feeling of pain, and I didn't want to feel that anymore. And I knew the first steps to get out of it. and then God did the rest.
Well, that's quite a story, Alex, and I'm really glad that you were able to get on here with us. And we things got a little busy for the UDR cast, and things got out of sync for a little bit. But we're back on track, and we're happy that you're here today. It was a really great podcast.
Yeah,
I really
I had a great time.
I enjoyed
time.
having you here, and but yeah, we are going to wrap it up. And so I don't know, Alex, if there is a possibility where somebody kind of resonates with what you said here today, you're welcome to throw your email down if you're comfortable with that. And if not, yeah, cool, man.
So if anybody wants to give me an email, just shoot me an email at adura233@gmail.com.
Right on. Yeah, and you can find me at forsythgroup.ca. And Billy, where are you at?
You can find me at the same old places, except the bar and the drug dealers. You can find me at Bill Ward Life on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever. I'm going to be focusing on a Canadian tour, helping my First Nations brothers and sisters, talking about spiritual malady, talking with businesses, corporations, organizations about the same thing. I think there's a lot of misconception out there about this, like the mental crisis, mental illness crisis that we have. To me, it's a spiritual illness crisis, and I really want to bring that to light over the next number of years here, and just going to be really fucking digging into trying to move forward in my new business career. So yeah, that's where I'm at. That's what I'm doing.
Right on. Okay, thanks everybody for listening tonight. We'll see you next time.